Hello and welcome to episode 96 of the Rollo and Slappy Show. Today is June 18th, 2018. I am Rollo McFlugel and with me is Slappy Jones 2, and we are both of McFlugel.com. The show notes page for this episode is McFlugel.com/96, where you'll be able to find links to the things we talk about as well as ways to follow us on this podcast and on the website and everything else and other social media ways. And also to check out our sponsor, LibertyMugs.com. And if you were thinking about checking out or subscribing to the Tom Woods Liberty Classroom and you weren't quite sure you wanted to do it, if you sign up through our link on the show notes page, we will send you a Liberty mug for free. So I don't know what else we could offer you to make you want to do that, but I think that's about as good as it gets. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Slappy, and he's going to introduce our episode topic.
Thank you, Rollo. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us. I'm Slappy Jones. This is the Rollo and Slappy Show. So today, we're going to kind of maybe move away from libertarianism a little bit.
Maybe we're socialists now?
That's obviously implied, yep.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about a little Twitter exchange or tweet that happened, what was it, yesterday, earlier today, or 2 days ago? I don't know.
I don't know.
I guess I could look at the date on the tweet, the 16th, which today's the 18th. So, yeah, 2 days ago. I have not been active at all on Twitter in the last 3 weeks, but I have a...
You mean 3 years?
Yeah, that. But we have been on Minds, and by that I mean I checked it a couple times, and I think I wrote something, but I'm not sure if it went through. So
yeah, everyone get on Minds. Where a lot of people are going over there, and Tom Woods had an episode on it recently. I like it so far.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of. I mean, I got on there. I haven't really messed with it much, but a lot of good stuff. A lot of good people I'm already connected to. I'm checking it again right now. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of good people, and I guess it's similar to Twitter, would you say? Yes.
I think it actually the user interface and user experience is actually pretty simple.
Yeah.
They add a layer of complication just because it's got the little crypto aspect to it, but I think it's pretty good. I mean, it's easy enough to grasp.
Whatever. There's a whole bunch of ANCAPs on there, so, I like it. We don't have to go into a whole thing on that. But anyway, earlier today, Rollo sent me a tweet that I guess you were commenting on somewhere. But it was a tweet that says, "What a time to be alive." And then it has pictures of two articles. First one says, I'll read the headline of the article. Quote, "Would you fight to free the man who killed your brother? This woman spent more than a decade doing exactly that." And then it says, "My brother's killer is now my friend." And it has a picture of the two of them. And the other headline is, "Woman and her rapist share stage for TED Talk. There's hope after rape." And some of the replies to this tweet are, here's one. "The question is worth asking. The question worth asking is this, ... why?" And someone replies, "Because they have Stockholm Syndrome." The answer, ding. And people keep, that seems to be a common theme, Stockholm Syndrome. Rollo, your thoughts? Where do you want to go with this one? Because I mean, as I understand Stockholm Syndrome, it's more a coping mechanism of dealing with your captor. So I don't know how forgiveness would be Stockholm Syndrome or necessarily Stockholm Syndrome.
Well, as I'm looking at the Wikipedia page for Thordis Elva, the woman who was raped and is on the speaking tour with her rapist, she actually currently lives in Stockholm. I just noticed that. So maybe that's what they were going for. But no, I don't think this qualifies as Stockholm Syndrome. I think it's... And I questioned someone on that thread as to why they were referring to it as Stockholm Syndrome, and they didn't... They responded, but not with any evidence.
Syndrome seems to me to be the thing people throw around all the time.
Right. I guess what they were going for is that they were saying that these people who are, predators of some sort, that their victims are being, they're good people, they're fine, there's nothing wrong with it. The implication of there's some leftist agenda that people who murder and rape should be accepted in society without really any issue.
Yes,
because that's what leftists do. I mean, for as bad as leftists are, I don't think that they're. This is what drives me crazy when people just don't take 3 seconds to think about what they're saying. The implication here is that leftists think that rapists, they're trying to normalize rape or something. Really? Have you been paying attention to what the leftists have been talking about? Everything's rape to them, and they want to, crucify anyone that they consider a rapist, whether or not it's rape, it's even rape. So, that doesn't even make sense. And on top, and then you look at the case of the guy who murdered someone. Is there anyone out there who's trying to normalize murder other than politicians? but the general person, right? The average person who's not outside of what the government's doing. They're just looking at a case of a civilian who murders a civilian. I don't know of anyone who's trying to normalize that or think
that's okay or acceptable,
right.
Whether they're left, right.
As bad as the leftists are on so many things, I don't think they're doing that.
They're pretty good on murder.
Yes. I will give them that. So the first thing that popped out in my head when I saw that is that, and I responded, I said, well, I don't know the backstory because it was just screenshots of these articles.
Yeah, there's not even links to the articles. It's just a picture, a screenshot.
And so my initial reaction was, well, I don't know what these stories are, but to me, it looks like they're just stories of forgiveness and reconciliation. And how is that a bad thing? I think that's a great thing. I mean, you mentioned that this isn't exactly going to be a talk about libertarianism because it doesn't really say, libertarianism doesn't say that you should forgive people. Yeah. This is where you have to, in order to try to live the good life, how do you do that? You need something else to try to do that. So for me, I'm a Catholic. I appeal to my Catholicism, Christianity, the Gospels, where there's a lot of things about forgiveness and everything. So I think a lot of these people who tend to be, more libertarian and conservative tend to fall into that category of being Christian. Obviously, not everyone is. There's plenty of people who are not Christians, but that is a huge message in that faith. And so to see stories of forgiveness and to just say, that's ridiculous, I think is pretty wrong-headed, especially when it's something it's easy. If someone, bumps into you walking down the street, it's very easy to forgive that. That's not a big deal. You shouldn't pat yourself on the back for forgiving someone for doing that. When someone murders your brother or rapes you, there's a lot bigger deal to forgive someone for doing that. And so I think that when you are confronted with these stories, I think you should kind of look at what's going on and actually, know what these stories are to be able to look at it, make a fair judgment on it. Because I actually did look up these stories, and I think they're amazing, powerful stories, and I think they're good, and I think they should be spread. It goes against maybe our how you would initially react to something to say that, oh, you become friends with this person, but why shouldn't I? You mentioned earlier when we were talking about this before we went on. Whose business is it other than the victim to decide whether or not they want to prosecute something like this, or what the punishment or restitution should be. And I do want to touch on that, but I don't know if we want to talk about. Maybe we should talk about the stories first.
All right, yeah, talk about the stories.
Okay. Just so that because I want to continue to dominate the conversation.
Yeah, keep going. You know the stories.
Yeah, so we'll go over the first one. Thordis Elva. I'm reading the Wikipedia page on this. We'll link to the actual links from the tweet so you can go and read them if you want. But Thordis Elva was an Icelandic playwright, author, and activist. And when she was 16 years old, there was a man who was 18, Tom Stranger, was, I'm reading the Wikipedia thing, was offered a student exchange trip to Iceland where he met 16-year-old Thordis Elvis at a theatrical event organized by the school they both attended. So they began a relationship, and about a month into it, Thordis got drunk and Stranger raped her. And so I think they broke it off after that. And Elva was experiencing obvious emotional trauma for a while. And so after years of this, she actually reached out to Stranger in an email, and he responded. They had a back and forth. She ended up forgiving him, and now they go on a speaking tour to talk about, what happened in that issue. So she apparently, found some closure to it, and found some peace to it. I'm sure she still has some sort of suffering involved with it. I don't know how you wouldn't. Hopefully she doesn't, but I think it's good for her. Good for her that she found a way to deal with it and has peace with it. And on top of that, was able to make good with her attacker. I don't know who, other than her, who would be in a good position to say whether or not he should be forgiven or what should be done with him.
How about the state?
Hello. Yeah. Oh, they do such a good job with prosecuting criminals and non-criminals. So, do you have anything you want to say about that, or you want me to go to the next one?
Let's go to the second story.
Okay, the next one, and I want to make sure I get the names right. I'm not sure I will. Denise Taylor is who the other story is about. Her brother, Bo, was... Sorry, I'm like flipping through 15 tabs to try to... and this tab isn't working. Okay, here we go. I don't know the guy's last name. Oh, okay, here we go. So, apparently there was a drug deal that went wrong. And Ronnie...
Is this in the United States?
Yes. Yes.
Whatever. Sorry to ask questions.
Yeah. And Ronnie Fields ended up shooting and killing... I believe he shot him. He killed Bo Taylor, thank you. And he got a life prison sentence. And so Denise, Bo's brother, again, in a way to try to, make peace with herself with what was happening, reached out to Ronnie Fields while he was in prison, wrote a letter to him, and he responded back with a letter saying how sorry and remorseful he was over what he had done. And it ended up being that Denise and her father, Jim, had a back and forth with Fields and developed a relationship with him. Decided that, he was truly sorry for what he did, and they worked to get him out of prison. And they eventually did. And it's pretty, powerful reading some of the stuff with what happened here, because the father said that what he wanted to do during the trial was when Ronnie Fields took the stand, he wanted to just shoot him.
Understandable.
Yeah. But apparently the Taylors were the only people that were visiting Fields in prison. And let me find the quote, because it was pretty good. Yeah, okay, so I can't find the quote because my browser's being absurd. But Fields said that the fact that they visited him and reached out to him and forgave him, it felt like he felt human, and it really helped him. And I think that's an important thing, is that I think back to the book Resist Not Evil by Clarence Darrow, which is excellent, by the way. It's short. You get it on Mises.org for free. You can download it. But he talks about how messed up the prison system is and how it's just all about revenge, all about revenge. And then when you do that, and when people, look at punishment as a way to deal with criminals, and it's all about revenge, it's all about getting your pound of flesh, it really dehumanizes the person. Not that we should just not have consequences for these sorts of actions, but how do you think that person's going to turn out if when they do something wrong that you just spit them aside to the dregs of society and say, you're not worth anything anymore, and we're going to lock you in a cage forever, throw away the key, and we don't want anyone to remember you. And if you get out, good luck, but you've got this scarlet letter on you. Not that, and that's just not say that there shouldn't be, reputation in play and some sort of ostracism mechanisms in a free society. But the whole almost fetish for revenge for someone, committing a crime is I think it's largely unhelpful. Do you have any? Yeah.
No, I mean, I totally agree. I think there's, let's kind of wrap it into libertarianism, because, I really don't know those answers. I don't think it helps to pile on, like you talked about revenge. I don't even think it's good personally to hold grudges and be angry all the time.
I agree. Yeah, it's not. I mean, again, it's easier. It's funny because it's a time preference kind of thing. I think is that when you have a high time preference, it's easier, and you get that immediate satisfaction out of just hating on someone.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think it's kind of destructive in the long term. Whereas if you actually go through a little bit of emotional pain to give that, hatred up and to forgive him, it's really kind of freeing.
Yeah.
We talked about some of this stuff back in episode 53 when we had Brave the World back on the show. So I suggest to go back and listen to that. I mean, before I didn't want to forget, so I threw that in right there, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, when we tie it back into libertarianism, because some people will argue that the non-aggression principle, or, that person violated the non-aggression principle, he deserves to go to jail, or he deserves to be killed, or whatever the case is. But that's kind of absurd. The non-aggression principle does not prescribe any action. It just says you can't violate someone's property, or you shouldn't violate someone's property. And so
I think that is I don't want to cut you off, but I think that is a big oversight by a lot of people about what the non-aggression principle is and isn't. And, I wrote an article recently about saying that it's not axiomatic. And that's a debate to be had, whether it's axiomatic or not. But there is no debate over whether or not it's a prescription for what to do.
Retribution.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny how the retribution kind of sinks in the thought everywhere. So it was last summer. You do our meetings. We meet up once a month and talk about stuff. And we had a guy who was in the seminary. He was there, going to be a Catholic priest. And I'm talking about anarchism and why we don't need government, And so he disagreed, like 99% of people do when they first hear it. And so I started bringing up examples and talking about things, and just talked about, okay, if you're a Catholic priest or studying to be a Catholic priest, and the state does this, and this, and these are all clearly against Christianity. I mean, you can't even come up with a way to defend this as a Christian. If I refuse to pay my taxes, how is that a bad thing? Because he was arguing that it's your duty as a Christian to pay taxes. And his answer was, well, would you take the punishment? Would you go to jail? And I wasn't thinking straight, and I just said, yeah, sure, like, who cares? It doesn't matter what happens after the fact. If I kill someone and then go to jail, it doesn't make it right that I killed them. What you do after the fact has no bearing on the original action, whether it's right or wrong. And I said, yeah, sure. I go to jail afterwards, but I didn't pay him. And he said, yeah, that's fine. You're doing it as a tax protest? I said, yeah, sure. And he was like, well, I don't see how that would violate Catholicism. And so I was kind of scratching my head. I was kind of taken off by it. I wasn't sure. I was like, so that's it. Okay, so then it is okay to not pay your taxes as a Christian. You know. But then as I reflected on it later, and he said, well, would you go to jail for it or something like that? I should have said, why does that matter? Because what you do after an action doesn't make the original action right or wrong. Do you agree with that?
Yes, because I could say that if you wear green shirts, I get to punch you in the face. It, like, whether or not you wear, like, the fact that I say I'm going to punch you in the face has no bearing on whether or not you're.
Right.
It's justified to wear a green shirt.
If I'm over your house and I take $100 off your counter, and then like 3 weeks later I'm over your house and I give you the $100 back, that didn't make it right for me to take it without you knowing, even though I gave you the money back. Let's say I even gave you interest back. I gave you $120 back, but I never told you. I just took the money. That wouldn't make. So
that's where it went.
Yes, and you're getting it back. Just wait. You'll get an extra $20 with it too. But it doesn't make it right that I originally took it. Yes, I made up for it, but I still violate the non-aggression principle. That was still a problem. And then on top of that, people will say things. With this case, for example, some of the comments, and you kind of touched on this earlier, but they're saying, no, they did something wrong. They should have to pay for it. You're normalizing it. You're accepting it. You're allowing these people who shouldn't be out in public to be out in public. But, and you mentioned this earlier, shouldn't the victim decide that? And if not, why? So again, if you stole something out of my house and I said, hey, Rollo, there was $100 on my counter. It's not here. You were the only guy in the house. Did you take it? And you come clean and say yes. And I go, okay, I don't care. I was just wondering. Well, should someone else come in and punish you? If I don't care, I'm the victim. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. I'm the one who has the ability to get my money back from you or let it go. So I don't know why people are so upset about these or what a time to live. I think that's a great thing that someone can forgive and move on and not live with all this anger inside. So
yeah, I agree. And that's not to say, because I know people are going to say, well, so what? We can't, have any sort of discrimination against people who commit crimes that we don't approve of? No, of course you can. That's what voluntary association is. If you don't like the fact, if you find out that I took money from Slappy, and even though Slappy doesn't care, all right, you may care a little bit, so maybe you don't trust me to go into your house anymore.
Right.
That's a fair consequence. But to say that you can come and lock me in a cage, or, put a gun to my head and say, you need to owe Slap, you need to give me $100 so I can give it back to Slappy. That's not right.
Or to say it's a crime against society, or what do they say? Isn't that what they say? It's a crime against...
I think so.
Society. Like if you punch me in the face, it's not a crime against me, it's a crime against society, and that's why you have to go to jail.
Yeah.
And then there's like civil court, and that's where it's a crime against me.
I think so. But yeah, it just shows, the current justice system is not set up well to deal with this kind of thing. Because like you said, it's crimes against society. And even if the victim doesn't care to press charges, they will often press them anyway. Where Bob Murphy has an excellent talk about prisons in a free society and how they might come up, and how it's actually would be it actually would be voluntary, because if you do commit a crime, especially a violent crime, people aren't going to trust you anymore in one way or the other, and there should be a way to have a mechanisms to deal with that. Or if you commit a crime, there's a violent crime like murder or something, there's probably going to be people that want to come after you. Like this, in the case of Ronnie Fields, Jim Taylor wanted to shoot him when he was on the stand. So if there were no government court system to deal with this stuff, there could be the potential, or even if there were, there is still vigilante justice out there. So if you know that you did something and people want blood for it, you probably want a way to protect yourself. And so you would have these, I'll throw the link up in the show notes page because we can talk forever about this, but, the Bob Murphy talk.
Listening to.
Oh yeah. But I was thinking about this the other day, I think independent of these stories, but, it creates a situation kind of going off the Murphy talk. It creates a situation where people who, it's kind of fun, interesting because it creates a kind of an economic benefit. I was thinking about the case of Bernie Madoff, where he was a smart guy, really knew his stuff. I mean, he was the president of the NASDAQ.
Yeah.
Once he got caught, if he was in a free society and there was no prison to send him to, what does he do? He's not like a risk to physically hurt people. So in order for him to get a job, for anyone to hire him, it's a risk because he committed massive fraud. So if you hire him again, there's a risk there that he's going to do it again. So what happens there? The demand for him goes down. So he's got to ask for a much lower salary if he wants to be hired by someone. So if someone wants to take a risk on him, they could make out pretty well, and he's got an incentive to be on the straight and narrow and act honestly and everything in order to build himself back up and to make money and to pick up the pieces.
Well, what about all the money he stole?
Was there any left? I mean, he would obviously owe restitution. I mean, if he took money fraudulently from people, then it's theft, and he would.
Yeah, and that's where
he would
Bob
owe it
Murphy
back.
talks about this. He talks about the insurance companies and the coverage. So we would probably have like a general liability policy, which may have caught his fraud because they would be on the hook for a lot of money if it was fraud. So they would have their own little system to make sure it's not fraud.
Right. Well,
whereas the SEC investigated him several times and never found anything.
Yeah. What's his name? Caught him.
Yeah.
And reported him to the SEC.
Markopolis.
Yeah.
I forget his first name. He was up in like Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And so it was possible to catch him in this. And if the SEC's money was on the line and their jobs were on the line, maybe they would have.
Right. But when you have free markets working in this way, it's really incredible how you can take bad situations and turn them into economic positives for basically everyone.
Right.
But yeah, going back to the this kind of fetishism for violence, I think it's a shame that there's so many people out there, because it is. I think people get confused with the idea of kind of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and dealing and being responsible and accountable for your own problems. I think people kind of conflate that idea with this whole punishment thing. And so it creates this kind of nasty vengeance kind of desire for people.
Yeah, I mean, I really think a lot of it just has to do with the existence of government. It's one of my frustrations with Christianity, but people generally, not just Christians. But it's like government is God. And so if they say this is the punishment, that's it. There's no questioning. Right.
And that's the problem with the state and how deep it runs into the minds and psyches of people, is that, you've got even a lot of libertarians, and I don't think this is really that, major. I think it's a problem with some libertarians, but I think it's a lot more of an issue with kind of your more
Normies.
conservatives and your boomers and your normies. But even still, there are a lot of conservatives who kind of fetishize punishment. And yeah, I think that is a symptom of how just deep. Cat jumped in my lap again. Just how deep the claws of the state have sunk into people.
Yeah.
That it's so difficult for even people who would otherwise be completely good on libertarian ideas and these things to kind of mess it up a little bit here.
Yeah, well, it's just, the state glorifies war all the time. And I know a lot of libertarians do get frustrated with this, but you'll see a cop arrest someone, and it'll be particularly brutal. And libertarians, rightfully, will be angry about that. They'll be upset about it. But then when it comes to war, a lot of times it's just like, yeah, we're against war. It's war. Not realizing how serious war is, but the point in bringing that up, you think of the thousands and thousands of lives that are lost and people are maimed and burned alive. And that's just how deep the state has its claws in our mind. Like you said, that even people who are against war can't even get as upset about that as they do when it's something local and certainly on a much smaller scale. Yeah, we have a bad police state, but it's not like destroying an entire region of the world. So the state goes deep, even in us libertarians. Sometimes we got to think about it. And, think about how you treat each other. And if you want to come about a libertarian society, we're already crazy enough to normies. Wouldn't hurt to be a little forgiving.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is to don't just read headlines. And don't just assume that there's like this leftist agenda that is always there and the reason for things. Because someone took two very good stories and just painted it in a way that look at them normalizing, heinous crimes. When in reality, I have no idea whether these people are Christians or not in either of these stories, but they are living.
They're living as Christians.
Yeah, in a big way.
Yeah,
in a big way. You look at Pope John Paul II got shot, and he went to the prison where his attempted assailant was and forgave him. And I think that the guy was pretty remorseful too. Eventually, I don't know. I forget that whole story, but yeah, it's we should be looking up to those people and trying to institute that in our own lives. And hopefully you're not dealing with being murdered or raped in your family, but I'm sure there's smaller things in your own life that you're dealing with and maybe holding a grudge. Try not to, maybe read these stories and think about it a little bit and say, maybe, what, is it really worth it? Or would it be better for you, for the other person, and for everyone if you kind of buried the hatchet and tried to make amends?
Yeah, you will probably live a better life.
Yeah. And that's not to say that, if someone's not remorseful or isn't sorry for anything, not that you still shouldn't forgive them. It certainly would make it more difficult too. But, maybe your reaction practically on how you do. If they went to, in the case of the Taylors, if they met Ronnie Fields in prison and he was saying, I'm not sorry for it, or was denying it, maybe they still would have forgiven him, but I doubt they would have tried to get him out of prison. Which, my position on the state aside, and its prison and justice system, that would be understandable that they would just say like, oh, okay, well, I'm not really going to do anything for you. So, and in that case too, if he's not sorry for it, then you question whether he's going to do it again. So, it's complicated issues, but
certainly, but I don't know. I don't think. First off, it certainly doesn't violate libertarianism to forgive.
No, it doesn't.
And so I want to change subjects a bit and throw something at you you're not prepared for. So while I was looking at the tweet you sent me, I went and checked out your timeline. Is the U.S. government a business?
I found some... that was almost as... interacting with this guy was almost annoying as you people saying that tractors and fruitcake aren't awesome. No, it is not a business. In no way resembles a business at all.
What was he even trying to say?
Just that it's a business.
He just kept saying, like, that's all. I didn't really go into it deep, but that's all I saw. He kept saying it's a business. It's a business.
Yes.
It's a business.
I accused him of circular logic when he answered one of my questions, and he said, no, it's not, and then, like, offered to jackhammer me or something. And then I went back and said, oh, I guess I misunderstood what you're saying. It's not circular reasoning. But he got it so wrong that it was, like, it was pathetic. He is the definition of a boomer. I found the real life example of a brainlet Wojak, so I was pretty excited for that. The one of the praying mantis thing, the gif of him beating him with a very nice. That was perfect for the he says America's a business, and then someone like writes this nice, well thought out tweet as to objecting to that, and he just writes, no, it's a business.
It's a business.
I mean, and he was given like Walmart as an example. It's like, yeah, Walmart just goes up to people and says, we're going to give you this item.
And you're going to pay for it.
And we're going to put a gun to your head. And if you don't give us money for it, then we're going to lock you in a cage. That's how all businesses work.
Right.
I mean, when you have to make a separate category for the one thing that you want to fit into your definition for a word, that means that does not fit in your definition, and you need another category for it. Like, if I were to describe pens, and this is a pen, and a pen is a writing utensil that uses ink as the medium to write things. But also, if there's lead in it, I also want to call it a pen, even though that it has to have ink. But if there's graphite to write, it's also a pen. No, I mean, there's a separate category for that called pencil. That's what it is. But you can't say it's a pen.
But you can say the U.S. government is a business.
Yes, and I think he was like a conservative guy.
Probably.
Which is funny.
See, there's your Stockholm syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just calling it it's like, I'll just call it a business, and then it makes it okay that I do all this stuff.
Yeah, it's absurd. Like, yeah, that was funny.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Did you have a free market story?
I do. Do you have one?
No, go ahead.
We forgot to talk about this beforehand, but so as part of my job, you can take a step back. An episode or two ago on the Friends Against Government podcast, they were talking about occupational licensing and how Carr is a civil engineer and a lot of the certifications and everything just go directly through the state, and how it's very frustrating for him. Understandable. It's just a nasty system. But in kind of my field, in refining, there's a lot of, we talked about this before, there's a lot of private standards. A lot of these standards, especially when it comes to, I work with tanks now, so there's a lot more of a government oversight in there. But there are still
stuff up.
Yeah. There still are, the private standards are API, American Petroleum Institute standards specifically, are kind of the bedrock for a lot of these things, and local governments, state governments, even the federal government kind of take those standards and codify them into law, which isn't good, but at least they're taking something that isn't garbage. And then they do other stuff, which is stupid and frustrating. On top of that, it's not very helpful. But the point is that the really foundational things that you have to follow are privately developed, privately implemented. And it was actually funny. We had an audit recently from people from somewhere in the UK, and we were talking about the program and our overall tank program, and talk about all the inspections and things we do. And we're talking about the API stuff, and we mentioned the government's rules that they put on, and they're from over in like the UK, where they've got like government is pretty well on top of them for a lot of stuff. So I was expecting kind of them to be sympathetic to that, and they said, like, referring to APIs, like, you've got this like wonderful international standard that you follow. Like, what is the point of all this other stuff that the governments are throwing on top of you? It doesn't make any sense. But all that aside, API 653, which is the kind of reconstruction, repair, inspection standard for tanks, they certify people to be, inspectors for that. And so I'm going for that certification. You got to take a test for it, and it says that you have knowledge in it, and you can, make certain decisions, blah, 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 within the code for it. And so there's all these companies, typically inspection companies, that are very familiar with the code, that offer classes to help you prepare for taking the test. And that's what I'm doing this week. So, nice. It's there's an incentive to make sure that when you take the test, you're not going to fail it. The API certainly wants people to be knowledgeable and not just kind of pass the test by accident. And then there's an opportunity for profit to be made for giving the classes. So
yeah, and this happens with just about everything. I mean, SAT, test prep, my CLU courses, all have these classes as well. And I'm sure just about every certification that you have to pass a test, there's a course you can take for it. Mm-hmm. That someone along the line was really good in that field and thought they could help people pass the test. No one forced them to do it. No one mandated it. They just kind of came about and did it.
Absolutely. So anything else?
No, I got nothing.
Okay. So the show notes page for this episode, again, is mcflugel.com/96, which means we're coming up on 100. And I guess 4 episodes will be at 100. It's a big milestone. We might have to do something special for it.
Yeah, we're almost 2 years at this.
I know. It's funny that Brave the World episode that we mentioned earlier, which go back, and that was I think that was one of our better episodes. McFlugel.com/53. Go back and give that a listen to if you haven't heard that one before. I think it is a good compliment to this episode.
Yeah, definitely.
Our show notes page, McFlugel.com/96 for this episode. Go check out that to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, and we're on all your basic podcatchers. Also, subscribe to our email newsletter, and if you subscribe to that, we'll send you a discount to buy a Liberty mug. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, if you're thinking about subscribing to the Tom Woods Liberty Classroom, if you subscribe to our link on the show notes page to that, we will send you a free Liberty mug. Just make sure to send us an email or get in touch with us somehow to let us know that you did it so we can send that mug to the right person. It's any mug that you want at Liberty Mugs. Well, even it could be a 15 ounce, the big one. So, man, I don't know.
It's extra coffee.
Yes, or glue if that's what you prefer. We recommend fluids to put in the coffee cup, but you're more than welcome to put whatever you want, including solids. It doesn't have to just be a fluid. Our friends. So we've got Mance Raider at the Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast. Check him out. Has a lot of great interviews. Friends Against Government podcast with Car Campit and Bird Archist. Always doing something hilarious over there. Jeremiah Harding with everything. I don't understand how he accomplishes everything he does because he's doing everything all the time. Peaceful Treason podcast. They just had a crossover episode with Friends Against Government podcast, which was very good.
They're going to be on our show one of these days too.
Yeah, we're talking to them. We got to figure out when we're actually going to record. And finally, Dino with the Rogue File. He's good people too. I don't know. Is there anything else now?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. Oh, I was going. It's too late now. It's not too. I mean, it's too.
What'd you do?
No, it's just late at night. I wanted to do another intro and outro music that's different because the Friends Against Government podcast had a really limp intro a couple weeks ago. And so last week, if you noticed that our music was a little different, it was absolutely a way to one-up them and to just kind of smush their face in the sand, just like the Wildwood Cops do.
How'd it go? Were they upset about it?
I think so. There were tears.
Probably.
Yeah. So, subscribe, follow, tweet, like, share this episode, do all that good stuff.
Yeah, go on iTunes and rate us 5 stars.
Yes, check us out on Minds, too. We have to use our same names. Be happy to interact and cause mayhem over there with you.
Anytime.
So with that, we'll catch you next week.
Peace.